Tonight we start with President Trump and other world leaders who are gathered in France for the meeting of the Group of Seven Nations. This year's G7 summit comes as the president's trade war with China heats up and his differences with allies on a range of global issues remain unresolved. CBS News correspondent Kenneth Craig has the latest.
President Trump sounded upbeat as he had lunch with the meeting's host, French President Emmanuel Macron.
I think everybody's getting along, and I think we'll accomplish a lot this weekend, and I look forward to it.
The seven leaders posed for official photos, but behind the scenes there is likely to be tension between the U.S. and allies. The president and the other leaders disagree on many issues, from Russia to Iran's nuclear program to climate change. Friday's escalation of President Trump's trade war with China is on the minds of many at the summit. China, not a G7 member, unveiled retaliatory tariffs on roughly $75 billion worth of U.S. goods Friday. The president responded by announcing he would increase existing tariffs and ordered U.S. companies to leave China.
We're having a little spat with China, and we'll win it.
British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told reporters on Saturday that he'll push President Trump to de-escalate the trade battle. Last year's G7 became 6 against 1. President Trump refused to sign the traditional agreement at the end of the summit and left early amid disputes over trade. This year, President Macron says he won't bother with the joint communique, calling it a pointless exercise. Protesters are also converging on the meeting. Police fired water cannon and tear gas as protesters blocked roads in nearby Bayonne. Formal talks between the G7 leaders began Sunday morning. Kenneth Craig, CBS News.
The G7 will be the first in its 44-year history to end without any sort of joint agreement. President Trump has called for a special meeting Sunday about the global economy, in which he reportedly plans to contrast what he sees as a booming U.S. economy compared with those in Europe. Well, the world leaders who are at the G7 are expected to talk about the fires destroying the Amazon rainforest. Today, Brazilian officials mobilized 44,000 troops to battle the flames. That's an 85% increase from last year. So far this year, there have been more than 76,000 wildfires across Brazil. Manuel Bojorquez reports.
After days of protests in Brazil and around the world, Brazilian officials announced they would send in the military to combat the fires that continue to ravage parts of the Amazon, the so-called lungs of the world, which produce a substantial amount of the oxygen we breathe. This is what the aftermath looks like. Leaders at the G7 meeting in France expressed deep concern, from British Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
You're seeing the loss of habitat, the loss of species. We need to escalate this up the global agenda.
To French President Emmanuel Macron. The forest is a treasure of our biodiversity and our climate, thanks to the oxygen that it emits and thanks to the carbon it absorbs, he said. Despite an earlier call from President Trump offering assistance, Brazilian officials said there was no concrete offer of aid from the U.S. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro has been loath to let others meddle in Brazilian affairs. But critics say his policies, favoring economic expansion in the Amazon at the cost of environmental protections, are accelerating the destruction. While some fires happen naturally during the dry season, many of these are believed to be caused by farmers clearing land. The Amazon is vital to the fight against climate change, absorbing heat-trapping carbon dioxide. But the more it burns, the more CO2 it puts in the atmosphere. Manuel Bojorquez, CBS News, Brasilia, Brazil.
Well, back here in Montana, the Montana Highway Patrol were led on a high-speed pursuit through Billings late Saturday afternoon. According to Sergeant Kyle Hayter, MHP officers tried to initiate a traffic stop on a black Ford Focus hatchback near State and South 27th Street around 4:30 p.m. The suspect vehicle fled the site, leading MHP on a pursuit through the south side to Grand Avenue near Division. The hatchback then crossed Division and entered 6th Avenue North, heading the wrong way. Between North 30th and North 29th, the vehicle was clipped by a Chevy minivan that had been hit by a white passenger car that slammed on its brakes because of the incident. The two occupants, both male, fled the scene. One suspect was caught immediately, and according to MHP, he has several warrants in other states The other suspect is still at large. Well, in Shepherd, a school board announced yesterday Shepherd School Superintendent Scott Carter was placed on administrative leave with pay. In a post on the Shepherd High School Facebook page, board chairman Carl Openshaw said Carter allegedly engaged in conduct that violated school district policy, adding at no time was there any risk to the safety of students or staff. And we have reached out to Carter and the school board for comment, but have not heard back yet. And pending a review of the allegations against Carter, the Board of Trustees will appoint a temporary superintendent to ensure minimal disruption to school activity. Well, turning now to weather with Brett. It felt like it was a little cooler maybe, but it got up to like 90 today, didn't it? It's hot.
A little bit past 90.
Wow.
As we take a look at the almanac, show you that we did see a high today of 91 degrees. The overnight low was 61, so we're well above our average high of 84 degrees, the average low at 56 degrees. The record high 100 set back in 1969, the record low a chilly 36 set back in 1992. As far as precipitation, none so far, although there is some rain showers around the Billings area, and we could see some before midnight, and we're above average for this time of the month and also this time of the year, above our 30-year average. Like I said, some showers in the area, and we're going to talk about those and what you can expect in your 7-day forecast coming up in just a few minutes.
All right, thanks, Brett. Well, staying in weather news, 2 major hailstorms in less than a week causing problems for especially farmers and their crops in Billings and surrounding cities. Weather is always a concern for farmers and those who bring their crops to downtown Billings on Saturdays, but they say it's been a good season so far. The recent hail caused some problems for local growers, but everyone had plenty to sell today at the Yellowstone Valley Farmers Market. Mars Garden in Lockwood says they lost some of its crop and did have some hail damage, but farmers learned to anticipate the effects of challenging weather.
I can remember probably 25 years ago maybe that there was a pretty severe hail in August and pretty much everything got hailed out then. I think it's done pretty well. I think he's had a nice representation today.
Every year something doesn't produce as well as it did the year before. You can't really do anything about it. No sense in getting upset about it. You can't control it. So you just do what you can and pick what's ready.
Farmers in the Shepherd-Huntley area also have had some crop damage. One farmer called the damage devastating. Others in the area also have damage, including the Huntley Project Museum. The main building and some old buildings have been damaged, and some storage buildings on the 10.5-acre property may not be able to be repaired.
We have a schoolhouse that's closed right now, and we have just several buildings that are closed off because of the damage and just not ready to be inhabited yet. It's massive. A lot of farmers lost their crops. It's tough for the whole community. It's been a devastating 2 weeks, really.
Well, stay with us. More to come on the 10 o'clock news. It's an annual tradition here in Billings. We check in with Mitch Laggy, who is live at the Billings Clinic Classic, happening now downtown. And later in sports, the Mustangs try to inch closer a second-half title. Highlights against Idaho Falls on the way.
You're watching MTN News with Zoe Zandora, Storm Tracker weather with Rob Griggs, and sports with Casey Conlon. This is the 10 o'clock news on Q2, Montana's news leader.